Good afternoon once more. My name is Vinolia. I'm the Marketing and Event Coordinator for ISCA. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to the session, and please feel free to participate as much as possible. Without any waste of time, I'm just going to take you through some housekeeping rules. As you all know that every house has some rules which needs to be abided by. So, okay. Before we start, I would like to request everyone to please mute themselves. I can see most of the people are unmuted. I'm going to request for everyone to please mute themselves once you are in the session so that we can give our full focus to our speaker. And secondly, if you do have a question that you'd like to ask during the session, please just hold it or write it in the chat box, and the question will be presented after the presentation. And then if you would like to give your own question to our speaker, you will be given the opportunity to do so, but you'll be requested to please raise your hand after the presentation, and then you'll be noticed and given the opportunity to do so. Remember, the sessions are recorded. We are live on Facebook. You can just comment on Facebook, or you can just write straight into our chat box. And also, if you want to go through these sessions after the session, you can just go to our pages and then you will find these recordings. Today we do have our guest speaker, who is a well-known professor. Please remain muted. We do have our very own self-esteemed professor, who is Prof. Ahimbisibwe, who holds a PhD in supply chain management from Victoria University of Wellington, New Zealand, and also a Master of Science in Procurement and Supply Chain Management with a distinction from Makerere University, Kampala, Uganda, and a first-class degree in Bachelor of Business Administration, specializing in procurement and supply chain management, also from Makerere University, Kampala, Uganda. He also possesses a professional qualification, such as being a certified member of Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply, MCIPS UK, a fellow of Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, FCLT in UK, a certified member of Project Management Institute, also in UK, and a certified procurement professional, Institute of Procurement Professional of Uganda, IPPU, among other qualifications. He is a professor of supply chain management, a senior researcher, consultant, and an accomplished academician. Prof. Ahimbisibwe has over 15 years of working experience in universities, of which 8 years has been in senior managerial positions. He has served in various managerial positions as a head of department and as acting dean, both in Makerere University, dean of School of Postgraduate Studies, deputy vice chancellor, academics, and served as acting vice chancellor of University of Kigali. I'm not going to go through all of his bio because it's very, very long, but I'm going to give him an opportunity to say more about himself and the presentation is going to be giving us today. So I'm going to likely take this opportunity and give it to our very own Professor Arthur Ahimbisibwe to come and share this knowledge with you all. And thank you so much. Prof. Ahimbisibwe, you can continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, and good evening, colleagues. I once again take this opportunity to welcome you to this session. As you've heard, my name is Professor Ahimbisibwe, and my PhD is in Procurement and Supply Chain Management from Victoria University of Wellington, New Zealand. I also hold Masters with a distinction from Makerere University in the same area. I also hold a bachelor's first-class degree in the same area from Makerere University. And I also hold other professional qualifications, as she has mentioned. I'm a chartered member of Chartered Institute of Purchasing from UK. I'm also a chartered member of Transport and Logistics, that is the Institute of Transport and Logistics Management, also from UK. And I'm also a chartered member of Project Management Institute of UK. I have also been involved in teaching. Now it's 16 years, and most of the teaching I've been conducting it in the postgraduate school, where I've been involved in doing research. I have supervised over 400 students in postgraduate school completion, and I've also several publications, and I've also written several books. So I've been really involved in research, and at least I've understand some of the practices that are involved here. So without going wasting time, I would directly go into, we are going to start. So our today's session will focus on collecting and analyzing secondary research data. As you are all aware, in most cases, there is a lot of existing data which is outside there. And in most cases, some researchers might have limited time or resources to go to collect or look for fresh data or new data. So usually there is an opportunity to utilize the existing data. And of course, when collecting, analyzing secondary data, students usually face a challenge of determining what kind of specific information that is needed for the study. Moderator, could you please share my screen? Hello?
Yes, Prof. Arthur, I have network issues, but I will try my best. Let me try to share it.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so I was saying that the main challenge that mainly most of our students face is obtaining the secondary research data, which is appropriate for the specific study that they are going to conduct. In most cases, secondary data, you find that it was collected for a different purpose and might not be fit or be easily customized with the study that you are going to conduct. And additionally, most of the existing data research have got challenges. They have issues of reliability and validity, and usually the current researcher might not have much control over the process that was conducted. So basically, this session provides the best practices on how to collect and analyze secondary data, especially for master students and even doctoral students. I will also give you a basic comparison of when we talk about secondary data and primary data, because most of the students tend to ask this question, and it's very, very important to draw a clear distinction between primary data and secondary data. Like as I mentioned, secondary data means data that has already been collected by someone else earlier than the actual user who wants to use it at that time. So in most cases, it is past data, and because it's already collected, so it is easy and quick to obtain. And most of the available sources, you could look at government publications, websites, books, journals, articles, internal records, etc. And of course, for the case of primary data, you realize that primary data, this is usually first-hand information and real-time data. It is collected at that particular time when it is needed. And then, of course, secondary data is more economical because you don't have to spend money to go in the field. You don't have to spend money on experiments, etc., or running questionnaires. Here, what you have to do is just to go back to those either published or unpublished sources and be able to obtain this information. And the correction time for secondary data is usually short. And of course, when you look at primary data, it's usually, the process is usually longer and it can be expensive. And secondary data, usually it does not necessarily have to be specific to the researcher's needs. So you need to be careful to select with what kind of the data that you would need to use for your research. And in most cases, secondary data is in refined form. And of course, like as I mentioned, when it comes to issues of accuracy, reliability, and validity, you find that it is relatively less because this data was already corrected and you don't know how it was corrected and you are not even sure of who corrected it. So when we talk about secondary data correction, we are basically referring to gathering this information that is already available in different sources. The data, as we have mentioned, was already collected and has undergone some statistical analysis, and it's owned by the researcher that corrected it. So in this case, when you come in as the new researcher, you are going to use this information. Thus, you are not the owner. So the data is usually collected from primary sources and later made available for access to other users. Now, there are mainly two types of secondary data collection. We've got qualitative secondary data collection and quantitative secondary data collection. Quantitative data collection basically deals with the intangibles and looks at non-numerical data. It covers many factors like, quality, color, preference, appearance. It deals with those areas that are not easily measurable. Whereas quantitative data, of course, deals with numbers, statistics, and percentages. So the end goal determines which of the two types of secondary data collection a researcher chooses. Secondary data collection is mainly as concerned with quantitative data because most of the data that is in most of the big databases is data which has been corrected and is in quantitative form. So the following are the various methods of collecting secondary data. We have got collecting and obtaining information from the internet, collecting data via government and non-governmental agencies, accessing public libraries, getting data from education institutions, and then of commercial sources. I will just take you through briefly one by one. For internet, you just need to browse and do some surfing on internet and be able to obtain the information that you need. Of course, there is a lot of information on the internet, but you need to be clear of the type of information that you are looking for so that you do not collect junk information. And when collecting data from government and non-governmental agencies here, of course, you look at the published data, especially by government reports. You look at the data which has been collected by the National Bureau of Statistics, the government agencies, the ministries, the parastatals, etc. And then you can be able to get or dig out the kind of data that you need. And then you can also, of course, access secondary data from public libraries where we have books, we have journals, we have online libraries. You can go and you review the existing materials in the library, you review the books, you read articles, and then you can be able to obtain or collect this secondary data. You can also obtain secondary data from educational institutions. Most educational institutions, they conduct research, or they have got schools or faculties of postgraduate which conduct continuous research. So most of this research is collected in a repository, and it can always be easily accessed, and you can be able to go there and pick the kind of information that you need. You can also obtain information from commercial sources or sources of commercial information, where information can be obtained from bureaus. There are bureaus which are specifically established and which can avail data at a cost. You can go there, you buy their database, and then you can be able to to conduct what they call data mining, and then you can be able to come up with the kind of information or data that you would like to use. Now, there are steps that you need to conduct or to go through when using sources of secondary data collection. You need to identify the topic of your research and define clearly the purpose of research. The purpose of your research will basically determine much of the type of data or secondary data that you need. For example, if you are looking at, the purpose of your study is to, for example, explore or is an exploratory study. In most cases, it is always advised that you use a kind of qualitative research or data. And whereas if your purpose of research is to establish relationship or correlation between variables, or if your research is predictive in nature, then it is always advisable that you actually use quantitative kind of secondary data. So once you have studied and identified well your purpose of the study, which of course must be summarized by your research topic, you can be able to narrow down and identify the most relevant data which is applicable to your research. And once you have done this, then you can be able to narrow down on your secondary data sources. You check, and then you can be able to collect all the existing data related to the research from similar sources. And once you have collected the secondary data, you need to check and then, of course, clean up your data. You clean up your data to avoid duplications before assembling it into useful format. And then, of course, you need to analyze the collected data and check if all questions are being able to meet your research objectives. And if not, then you have, of course, to go back and see how to reduce that. So I have briefly also provided a brief comparison between qualitative analysis and quantitative analysis for secondary data, where usually when we are looking at qualitative data analysis for secondary data, we are more concerned with non-statistical data that cannot be easily computed. And whereas when we are looking at quantitative analysis, we are main objective and we are trying to focus on quantitative data. In most cases, and in most cases, when we are looking at, of course, quantitative data, we are focusing on measurable variables like length, size, weight, mass, and more. So the quantitative analysis is concerned with how many or how much a certain phenomenon occurs. And of course, when you look at qualitative data, for it focuses on understanding why a certain phenomenon occurs. So for the case of quantitative secondary data analysis, you tend to focus on to ensure that the sample size is large and adequate enough, and it can be generalized to cover the entire population. And this is mainly usually provided for, of course, through sample size determination, as provided for, of course, like by Krecher and Morgan. Whereas for qualitative secondary data analysis, usually the sample is small, and even if it is not representative of the entire population. So when you look at qualitative secondary data analysis, you are trying to test hypotheses. You have formulated some hypotheses and you test these, and then be able to provide future predictions or be able to draw conclusions. And like for qualitative analysis, where you try to interpret and understand the social interactions that occur, and where the research methodology is basically exploratory. So when we are looking at quantitative data analysis, we also need to understand the methods. Usually, there are two major methods for quantitative data analysis. We have got what we call descriptive analysis and inferential analysis. And Descriptive analysis basically focuses on looking at absolute numbers, summarize individual variables, and find patterns. And most of these examples, they are measures of central tendency, where we tend to look at means, median, mode, range, and we try to summarize all this data using percentages and frequencies. But for inferential analysis, we tend to look at complex situations of how relationships between variables and then be able to generate results and make predictions. Under inferential analysis, for secondary data, we look at things like correlation, where we describe the relationship between two or more variables. We look at regression analysis, where we try to predict the predictive power, or the how much a variable can be able to predict or create a change in terms of the other variable. We can also look at analysis of variance, where we can test the extent to which two groups significantly differ. But also for correlation and regression, we also have more advanced methods. Of course, if you are using longitudinal data, you look at autocorrelation. But if you are using, of course, cross-sectional data, and then it means that you are going to use, of course, these correlations. But also, there are more advanced methods. You could look at exploratory confirmatory, exploratory factor analysis. You could also use confirmatory factor analysis. There are more advanced methods, like analysis of moment structures, or EMOS, where you can use structural equation modeling, which is an advanced technique where you test multivariate relationships, and you try to establish the fit between the best fit of the models, and most of these are covariance-based models, where you establish the fit between the observed covariance matrix and the observed covariance matrix, and then you can be able to get the best fit. So those are some of the quantitative data analysis methods. There are more multivariate techniques, more advanced, but those are some of the few that you can look at. And then we also have what we call the qualitative secondary data analysis, where we have some of these other methods. We have content analysis, which is a method for subjective interpretation of content of text through systematic classification process, or which involves coding and identifying themes or in patterns of data. So once data has been put together, then you are able to establish themes using codes, and then you can be able to know the underlying pattern or the meaning. And then we also have narrative analysis. This one mainly focuses on the lives of individuals as told through their own stories. There is also discourse analysis. It involves analyzing natural occurring language use and the types of written texts. Then we have grounded theory, where you use this approach for theory construction. You try to develop a theory rather than testing theory. And of course, this is more inductive in nature rather than being deductive in nature. And then we have got thematic analysis, which is more similar to content analysis, only that content analysis can be used for both quantitative and qualitative, but thematic analysis is only used for qualitative secondary data analysis, and it is basically used to identify and analyze patterns or themes in the data by means of thematic codes. But last and not least, we also have softwares which are currently used to analyze secondary data, especially qualitative data. And one of the most popular ones is NVivo. And this software is used to organize and analyze interviews. It can, of course, be used to analyze field notes, textual sources, including images, audios, video files, etc, etc. So that is my brief presentation. I will stop here in the interest of time so that we can have more time to interact, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. Now I'm just going to give the platform to anyone who would like to ask any question that they might be having. I'm going to now open the platform to formally do so. If you have any question, you can just unmute yourself or raise your hand and ask the question right away. Thank you. Anyone who would like to ask their questions, please unmute yourself. I'm now checking the chat box and I can see that we don't have any questions in the chat box. But if you would like to ask any question with regards to the presentation that we just had, please formally do so. You are given, okay, I can see Amos, you raise your hand. You can unmute yourself and ask the question direct to the speaker. Thank you. Amos Aluma Jao, I can see you raised your hand. Please unmute yourself and state your question. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon, Professor and the all colleagues. I'm calling from Uganda. My question is on the citation, when you are how to cite a text or internet information. How do we cite that in your dissertation? Because we usually face challenges how to quote or how to cite the information. Thank you.
Can I come in?
Yes, please.
Thank you. I want to thank the listener who has just asked that question. That's a very good question and I appreciate. Citation is one of the challenging areas, especially for master's students and doctoral students. And citation is something, though slightly different, that you need to look at and understand. Citation, we have different types of citations. We have got the APA citation, we have got the Harvard, we have got several. We've had several, I can't list them and finish them. And each university, in most cases, has adopted its own or has chosen its own. So usually when you are citing, you cite in line within your university policy or within the line of the journal publication that you are writing in. Usually they tend to specify the kind of citations that you should follow. And in most cases, when you look at for example, APA format, the American Psychological Association format, these ones, they give you how to cite. How to cite, for example, if you are reading an article, a research article, how to cite if you are reading a magazine, how to cite if you are reading a book, how to cite if you are reading a published report, how to cite and a published report. They also show you how to cite something that you have read on internet. So you need to go back and see what kind of citation that your university uses or is supposed to use according to your university policy for research. Or if you are writing in a journal or writing an article for a journal, you have to clearly understand and reconfigure your citation format so that you can conform or comply with the required cite format of the journal of the university. When we're examining students for research, especially in postgraduate school, it's one of the requirements. If you actually, if you don't pass citations, your research cannot be passed. You have to go back, you have to be sent back, you go back, read and understand how to cite. So to cut the story short or to answer you in simple terms, there is a specific criteria under citation depending on the format that your university uses or the journal, how to cite when it comes to materials that you read from internet. And even depending on whether the materials that you've read on internet, they are recognized as published materials or whether they are unpublished sources, or whether they are government reports, or whether they are just people's communication, or whether they are important people or policy makers communicating, but there is always a guidance on how to cite articles that you read on internet, depending on the format of citation that your university is using. For example, my university uses the APA format, that's the American Psychological Association format for citation. And when you were, for example, when you go to it on internet, on Google, wherever, just a quick one, it will show you how to cite the materials or anything that you've read from internet. So briefly, go back. First of all, identify the format of citation that your university follows, because all those are different and you cannot mix all of them. If you mix all of them, then you have failed. The requirement is that you must follow one consistently up to the letter. So you need to identify what is your format that the university approves or approved, and then be able to follow that one. Check how under that format you are supposed to cite any materials that you read from internet, and usually under that same area, they will indicate to you whether they are referring to published or unpublished materials. So I hope that will guide you, and please look at it. It's very, very important. And also, when they are citing, they will show you whether you are citing a person, or whether you are citing a report, or whether you are putting the information in the mid at the beginning of the sentence, or whether you are putting it in the middle, or whether you are putting it at the end. But usually when you have used the data, for example, from the internet, let's say, for example, published reports from national Bureau of Statistics, they will always indicate and show you, of course, commodity prices, let's say for a given, maybe a given year, and then you will be able to cite that. You will say, for example, Uganda Bureau of Standards, 2000 and this. And when you go there in your references, you have to write it properly so that in full someone can be able to understand, and even put a link, the link of where you have read this report, so that someone can even click on the link and be able to obtain that online report. Sometimes some reports can be put online and they are removed. Sometimes you read something and you don't find it, but you need to put a link so that people can be able to follow. You put a link, you put a DOI, there is what they call a DOI, you put a web link so that people can be able to go there and see where you have read this and they don't doubt you. So that's a very important question, and it's something that you really need to understand. Citations are a bit tricky, and if you don't follow the right citation, unfortunately, we cannot pass your research at both master's and PhD. Hello?
Thank you so much, Prof. Arthur, thank you so much for your feedback. I hope that the person who asked the question has been well answered. We're going to move forward. I can see we have Peter Kilu. I'm just going to follow an order of which one raised their hands first. So I'm going to now hand over to Mr. Peter Kilu to now ask their question. Thank you.
And thank you very much. I must appreciate Prof for that insightful and a very informing discussion. However, my question is with regard to secondary data and the primary data. This is Kilo from Kenya, University of Nairobi. The question is, we've got several thematic areas for, especially in business oriented research. And my question is secondary data sufficient, conclusive for research in areas of like marketing, strategic management, international business, and related disciplines? I find secondary data is part of informing, supplementing the primary data. And therefore, I just want to hear from the wisdom of our Prof, if secondary data is sufficient, one can fly with secondary data without primary data. The other one is more of a comment that this is my first time to join this discussion or forum, but I must appreciate that COVID-19, sometimes we have to look at the positive and the negatives, has brought us into these forums of discussions online, and therefore, this is the time for Africa to arise. Africans, we have got to do research and do solutions to our challenges. Rather than being downloaders, let's be uploaders, uploading our research to the rest of the world. I really appreciate the forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter, and I appreciate your comments, and thank you for attending, and you are most welcome. Of course, Professor Amber will tell you, and will, of course, guide you. We usually have many sessions, and this is a very good running point. It is a knowledge sharing center, and we are always happy to share with you any knowledge that we have. Your question is very essential and very interesting, because you are asking whether secondary data is sufficient for any study, or whether secondary data is only for supplementary purposes. Peter, this is a very good question, and this is where this slide where I was talking about how to use sources of data in research methodology come in. The aspect of your research topic and the aspect of the purpose of research are the key determinants of which type of data, of secondary data that you are going to collect and use. If in some cases you find that your research objectives might be fully answered by secondary data, however, in some cases you might find that secondary data is not adequate, but you are limited or constrained by resources and time, and you have to submit in your dissertation or complete your research, publish it. So you have to go in for that kind of data. And also it depends whether you are going to conduct a longitudinal study or whether you want to conduct a cross-sectional study. Of course, if you are using time series data, secondary data collection becomes very paramount, because you have to look at data for some time, for a long time, and then if you are going to conduct a quantitative analysis, which is mainly at the center, of course, of predictive research, and then you are going to calculate things like autocorrelation, you find that secondary data collection can actually answer or be able to give you all the that you require for your research objectives. So for example, if you are trying to predict if the inflation rate or the rate of inflation in the economy, you have to first study the previous data, you have to analyze the previous trend, you have to look at the time series data, and you have to use that longitudinal data to be able to come up to a conclusion. And in most cases, a cross-sectional data might not be adequate. So here, what matters is the purpose of your research, the reason why you are conducting research, and which is basically the value that you want to create, the gap in knowledge that is not covered by others that you think you can cover. That determines whether collecting secondary data will be adequate or not. Of course, the best approach, I will conclude by telling you this, and my colleagues can, of course, they can give me their input. Of course, there is nothing better than primary data. Primary data would be the best, but naturally, we are constrained by resources, we are constrained by time, and we cannot be in position to collect all the data that we need. And we cannot be able even to move to all areas to collect all the information. For example, like if you are looking at data for census, you cannot say that you are going to conduct a primary study, you want to go and conduct your own census and then be able to collect your own data. It becomes very expensive for you, and it's even almost impossible. So to cover up that gap, that is why people use secondary data collection.
Yeah, Professor, can I answer?
Yes, please, you can come in.
You are absolutely correct what you are saying. This is Dr. Rashmi from India.
Yes, doctor, you are most welcome.
So I had the question of the one of my participant, and rightly you answered it. And probably when we are working on panel data, and that point of time we are basically focusing on secondary. But when we were studying on the basis of like primary, like information, behavioral aspects, in that case, we are concerning about the primary data. The data requirement from secondary to primary based upon the study objective. Depending upon the objective, we may select the data as rightly told by you.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you very much. I'm fully informed, but I wanted to just highlight one of the questions which has been raised with the reference to citation. Maybe I can add one of the in current era, we've got some applications in which we can utilize them. And most of the issues about with the reference to citation and all the related stuff is being taken care of by those applications. One of them, which I found is very useful, is what we call Zotero. And once you learn that, citation will be a thing, the problem of citation will be a thing of the past. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for reminding me that. Yeah, that's very good. Thank you. Yeah, we have also got now new softwares that can help you to arrange your citations and be able to do the work that we initially used to do manually. Thank you about that. I'd forgotten about that, but I'm aware about it.
We can use Mendeley also. Mendeley is the best software to use for citation by RSWS.
Yeah. Thank you, Doctor. We can also use Mendeley. Thank you. I think there are more now. Yeah, thank you. Any other question, members?
I can see we have Josephine among us whose hand is up. We're going to now give it the opportunity to Josephine to say their question. You can continue.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Josephine Mutunga from University of Nairobi, Kenya. My question is concerning secondary data. First, I want to appreciate your good presentation, Prof. And you mentioned that secondary data is usually collected and analyzed, and it's published and owned. In other words, it's somebody's data. So my question is, if I want to carry out my research using that kind of data, is it acceptable just to access the data and use it, or I have to seek approval from the owner of the data? Then number two, I kindly request if you could shed some light on panel data. If you could just explain a bit about panel data. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justin, from University of Nairobi. My greetings to you there. I have been your external examiner for the last 6 years in your postgraduate school, and I'm really glad to hear from you, and thank you for attending this session. When you are going to use secondary data, you have to get official permission from the owner. In most cases, if it is public information within the public domain, like government reports that have been published officially, reports that have been released by government agencies as they are mandated to do, those ones you can access without even requesting. You can go on their websites, you can go to those organizations, you request them if the need is there. But most of the information that is published and is in public domain, you don't have to request for official permission to access it. What you have to do and observe is, of course, avoid plagiarism. You have to make sure that you acknowledge the source of this data by citing it properly and acknowledging, of course, the authors, the people who conducted the research by citing them in your references properly. So if the reports or if the information is published officially and it's the mandate of the government agents to do so, you are okay, you can go ahead and publish and use that data without necessarily having to get permission again. But if the information is for a particular organization and the organization is in private sector, they collected their own information, or if it is some information that the government has not released officially and you want to use it, you have to write to them or you have to go there and seek for official permission to be able to use their information. And usually it is always a very good practice, whether this information is published or not, but always have some communication with the people who did most of these reports. Like if you are, of course, using many of them in your secondary data, so that you can make sure that there is harmony. And also, in most cases, there is always ethics committee. Ethics committee will always guide you as to whether you need to seek for official permission or not, in case they realize you have not done it. They can also guide you. Even your research supervisor can also guide you on the way forward, depending on the prevailing circumstances, because this can vary from one country to another. But all in all, it is always good to request for the information that you are going to use for research to avoid future challenges and avoid having problems. The best practice is that you request for information formally if it is not a recognized published report that is released into public. About the panel data, of course, this is data that is generated from members or experts who usually come to discuss certain topics, like some of the specialized topics. You could have maybe a team of medical doctors discussing, let's say, issues of cardiology, issues of, in their area, or you could have social workers, experts discussing their topics of concern. And usually this data, of course, you can use it to conduct your research as secondary data, because like when these people are discussing, this information can be recorded, this information can be published, and or even you can listen to them. It could be a TV program, it could be a radio program, it could be a given forum, and or it could be like a blog or etc. And panel data is very important because you are listening to experts, you are listening to from the horse's mouth, and it is always a very good kind of information. So it is also secondary data information that we can use for research, and it all depends on the purpose of your study and how you find that kind of panel data fitting into your research. Justin, I hope that answers you.
Yes, thank you very much. I really appreciate. I'm well informed.
Thank you, Justin, and I'm happy to hear from you.
Okay, thank you so much. We do have Mr. Peter who wants to say something. Ms. Josephine, you can put your hand down if everything is fine from your side. So Mr. Peter, you can unmute yourself and continue with the question.
Thank you very much. I'm just taking advantage of this battery of scholars and wisdom. If the convener and the prof, you can allow me to ask a question related to data analysis. Is that okay?
It is okay. Please proceed, Peter.
Thank you, Prof. Now,
yes, you're welcome.
Thank you, Prof. Now, as researchers, we collect data based on our hypotheses or objectives. And of course, our hypotheses are derived from the objectives. And therefore, in the level of PhD research, we normally have the independent, we have variables, independent variable, dependent, moderator, and the mediator. Now, the question which I'm posing is, there are some, and we collect data based on those variables relationship, because it is from those hypotheses we want to test and collect data to test the hypothesis, whether to support or to reject. Now, the question is, recently, I don't know whether it is recent because it started back 1986, Barron and Kenny, but the practice, when I've, during my immersion of literature review, I find it's more of recent from 2019 to the current. It is what is being referred to as conditional indirect effect in data analysis. This is in simpler, in other terms, it is what being referred as moderated mediation analysis. Maybe I would like from the doctors and the profs to get some more insight into that analysis. Which are the current tools for analyzing moderated mediation or mediation moderated sort of relationships? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Peter. That's a very good question. You're asking about confounding variables, the moderators, the mediators. You are talking about mediated relationships, the mediated and moderated relationships, the moderated mediated relationships, and so forth and so forth. This is a very interesting area, and usually this one we don't collect data specifically on say that you collect data intentionally, knowing that this is going to be a mediator or a moderator. But usually what we do, we test for mediating relationships, and there are many authors who have provided guidance. There is Ben and Ken, and I think they have even established a software which can help you to test those. But you can also create data for moderation based on the techniques of data analysis that you are using. For example, in structural equation modeling, this is very possible. You can create variables for moderation, and that is where actually, if you look at my dissertation for PhD, I was testing moderators, and I created several curves. I have several models. I tested, I think, over like 200 models, but all these models, the data you generate it from what you create from the data that you collected on dependent and independent variables. So when you are trying to obtain data for the moderators and mediators, from the beginning, do not be worried unless the literature has already guided you that such a variable is a moderator. But in some cases where you are not sure, you collect data, and once you have collected data, whether secondary or primary, then you start testing. And there are conditions which are clearly stipulated for testing for mediation and even for testing for moderation. Although I have realized that there are some people who confuse moderation and mediation, or even mediated and moderated relationships, or moderated and mediated relationships. They mix them up, and there is some challenge in the literature. So when you are reading, you have to be very careful. But if, for example, you want, I have seen even one of the publications, I can't remember it, but for them, they even provided how you can create variables through what they call multiplicative terms, where you can, we multiply what we call
We are using structural equation modeling to address the mid-ration and moderation analysis.
Yes. Yes.
And
So
the softwares are available like Amos, Smart PLS, Adanco, then Jamobi, JSP. These all are the softwares are available for mediation, moderation, mediated moderation, moderated mediation analysis.
Yeah, there is also another app available online, which was developed, I think, by Ben and Kenny, which also it gives you a platform where you can put in your variables and then it tests for you and even produces for you the curves. It is available if you check for it on internet. So apart from those multivariate techniques, like for path analysis, structure equation modeling, analysis of moment structures, etc., which can do it directly, there are also other applications that have been generated. So Peter, thank you very much for that question. It's very good, though it is very advanced. That is my area. I'm very familiar with those areas. And my request is that as you swim through the literature, be very careful. There are some articles that I found tended to mix up those two confounding variables. Thank you very much.
Thank you too, Prof.
You are most welcome, Peter.
Okay, we're going to move forward. I see there's a question in a chat box from Diogratius Muanga, which says, how can one cite panel data?
I beg your pardon?
The question states, how can one cite panel data?
How can one cite
panel data? So I'm not sure. Let me just try to get them on to unmute their mic so that they can specify what they meant by their question. Dear Gracious, if you are with us, you can unmute yourself and ask to our speaker.
Deo, are you there? Deo.
I can see the person is still with us, but I'm not sure what could be the problem. Dear Gracious, if you are here, please unmute yourself so that you can interact with the speaker on what question you wanted to ask. Okay, I'm not gonna waste any more time. Let me check our chat box again. Okay, there's another, I'm not sure if it's a comment or a question which comes from Lillian Tamali, which says panel data citation was explained by Prof. He gave examples of medical panels. Okay, I think they're trying to just clarify on what a that person was trying to ask, that you already touched on the area of the panel data citation. So I believe that they got every information. I'm just assuming. Okay, dear Gracious, you can just unmute yourself again just to clarify what you're saying. I can see you were unmuted. Please just continue with your question. Prof, I'm not sure what's going on with Deogratius. He just unmuted himself and then mute again. So I believe we're just going to move from this chapter and then move forward. Is there anyone who'd like to get a clarity of something with regard to the presentation before we move on? They can just unmute themselves and say whatever they'd like to say. You can just comment, you can ask a question, anything that you'd like to say. I'm just going to give the platform to you, audience, just to say anything that you'd like to say with regard to the presentation. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. It's a good evening in Uganda. I'm very happy to be part of this presentation. And I'd like to appreciate Professor for this.
Good evening. Good evening.
Yeah, for me, it's a compliment and also a request. How often do these presentations happen? And can we have more of this? Thank you. I'm a lecturer, but also a PhD student, and this is really my area, and I'm happy to be part of this. I've learned a lot today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That is she's one of our good staff, and she's also a PhD student. And maybe I will ask Professor Amber to get aware of how we can get these PhD students and some of our master students on board, because most of them, they seem not to be following some of these sessions, and they can benefit more. So maybe Professor Amber, we might need to bring these students on board, because this is very important, and this is what we look for when we're examining their dissertations. It can be very helpful, and we're always there happy to guide. And then the other thing, maybe I would wish to communicate to Peter. Peter was asking a question on mediation and moderation. Please try to look at those articles of Baron and Ken. Most of the initial work that was done originated from Baron and Ken. Look at their publications, though they're a bit old, but I would advise you to start from a bit there. Start from there, and even they have developed now an app. Those two authors.
Sam gave me comfort that he knows this company, and they are in the health technology space.
Sorry about that.
Baron and Ken, they have provided methods of testing for mediation, for moderation, for all those confounding variables, how a mediator can again be a mediator or a moderator. We have got variables where they hold relationships, there are conditions for testing, for mediation and moderation. And the original work was mainly published by Baron and Ken. I would really encourage Peter, my friend there online, to really look at it. It's very, very important.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Arthur. Lillian, Miss Lillian, I heard you asked about how often do we have this kind of sessions. We normally have this kind of sessions after 2 weeks. Like, for example, today is on the 4th. So we're going to have another session on the 18th of this month as well, which is 2 weeks after this one. So we normally have this kind of sessions after 2 weeks. And we do post the dates and update everyone on our social media platforms and also through email addresses. So if you'd like to be part of ISCA, please, you can just keep in touch with us. You can email me directly on my email address is on the chat box, which is masipa.nv@isca.org.za. You can just email me directly.
Yeah, so madam, can I ask you one question?
Okay, please continue.
Yeah, madam, this is Rashmi, Dr. Rashmi from India.
Okay, you're welcome, Dr. Rashmi.
So my question is, I am very good at primary data and analysis and all. So if any opportunity is there as a speaker and all, so I am interested. So please share me if you have any opportunities in online platforms where I can deliver, then I could have make it good for the respondent and audience.
Thank you so much for that information. Please do email me directly with your bio and your photo, and then we will take it from there. Just email me directly on the email I was stating, which is masipa.nv@isca.org.za. You can just email me there, and then we'll take it from there. Thank you so
share
much.
Your email ID in chat box?
It's in our chat box. I've just shared it. Let me just share it again. Okay, done. You can just email me directly and then we'll take it from there. And thank you so much for coming forth with that information.
Mashipanef@aiscr.org.za. This one?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rashmi. Prof. Arthur Ahimbisibwe, if you want to maybe give a comment or an overall of everything that you've been saying, you can just continue. Just a comment, a closing comment for your presentation before we close with the session.
Yes, sure.
Thank you very much. And maybe I will just conclude by advising researchers that the type of data that you will use will depend on of course, the purpose of the study that you are going to conduct, the topic of your study, the research objectives or hypothesis that you have formulated and you want to test will determine the type of secondary data that you are going to collect. But you should also bear in mind that secondary data can also be qualitative and quantitative. I think that is it. And I also encourage our students, especially these PhD, doctoral students and masters, and even other researchers who are interested in attending our sessions, always follow us up. And also maybe you might need to share with them some of the other benefits that we enjoy through this forum as members so that they can also benefit. Otherwise, I thank you very much and I wish you the best.
Thank you so much for your enlightening words, your wonderful presentation, and it was very informative. And I would like to thank our audience as well for a wonderful engagement with our speaker, and also those who were giving an input here and there with regards to everything that has been happening in this session. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you all. And remember, these sessions are recorded. We are live on Facebook. We do have these recordings after the session where you can access them on YouTube, our Facebook, our Twitter, as well as our LinkedIn. You can just go there and access these recordings. As I have stated that we do have these events which are happening every after 2 weeks. So you can just avail yourself, inform other people as well about this kind of sessions that we're having. The more the merrier, as they say. So without any waste of time, for those who like to have the presentation slides, I have already given out my information on the chat box that you should email me so that you can have access to the presentation. And do not forget that we are also going to have our Game Changer Series session, which is going to happen on the 30th of this month. So you can just avail yourself as well for that session. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our guest speaker formally for being with us. It was very kind of you to be here today with us. And I would like to thank the audience as well for availing themselves for this session as well. So I would like to say, without any more words, enjoy your evening and continue supporting ISCA further. And thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Nice session. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.